Okay.
So hello everybody, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm here today with Georgia, who I'll bring on to introduce herself in a minute. Just before we start, just to make sure that you like the video, that you share it with your friends and around your network and other people that you think might benefit from what Georgia does and what we're going to be talking about, and also click the notification bell so that you get to hear when there's a new video, so that you'll be able to watch it live or indeed watch the videos later on. So today we're going to be talking about AI and books, particularly in relation to Christmas and other special occasions. And I've got an expert in that field with me today, Georgia Kirk. Hello, Georgia, and maybe you'd just like to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, Christopher. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. My name's Georgia. I run two publishing support businesses, one called Write Business Results and the other called Cleobooks.ai. And the premise of both is that we help non-fiction authors get what's in their head out of their heads and onto paper. And then they have the support of humans to whip that manuscript into shape, ready for publishing and promotion. And we like to do that in a way that is most convenient to authors, because we know that you're busy and time is always the most precious commodity. So the more of that we can give you back or save you, the better. Cleobooks in particular leverages AI to help that process. So it's a tool that helps you plan your book and then suggests the book structure and gives you questions to answer so you can speak your book. And that really it makes it very fast and time efficient. So it's a pleasure to be here with you, Christopher.
Okay, well, we'll go into that in more detail a bit later. So just to start with, I mean, how one of the things that AI can be useful for is in book discovery and personal recommendations. And I'm just wondering whether you've got any advice or tips that people might be able to use to use AI in that way.
Yeah, I think the conversational nature of a lot of AI is quite fascinating, and it does make asking for recommendations very very simple, doesn't it? I don't know how many of you used like ChatGPT's voice assisted feature, for example. So it might be that you go on to there and ask the AI for its the best Christmas reading list, possibly. Yeah, but I imagine through the nature of your work, Christopher, you have access to all sorts of recommendations.
Well, I'm building a which will launch in the new year. One of the things that is an aspect of the Icelandic tradition is that they create a book catalog, if you like, of all the books that are published in the Icelandic language that year.
Wow.
And it gets sent in print as a paper document to everybody in the country. And then there's a big conversation about which books to buy as gifts to their loved ones at Christmas. And then they spend the rest of, once they've received their gifts, then they spend the rest of the holidays reading their new books.
So I adore this. Honestly, yeah. when we first met a few months ago, I sort of like it was. I was almost a little starstruck because the tradition itself is now well known, but a lot of that's the work that you do. But just the idea of it's so wholesome. And I heard also that in Iceland they're prolific writers, and that they have the highest concentration of writers for the country, I believe, in comparison to other countries.
Well, 1 in 10 people apparently writes a published book in Iceland.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because in the rest of the world, it's like I think it's 6 in every 1,000 that get started make it into print.
That's right. And what you might not know, because I guess we've not talked about it, the thing I'm best known for in the trade is I was actually the pioneer of World Book Day in the UK. So I persuaded the book trade in the mid-1990s to celebrate World Book Day.
I see. Yeah, and it has such a big impact now. You must feel proud when you go onto social now on World Book Day and you see all the photos of people, how they've dressed up their children to go to school. I
wasn't responsible for my contribution was that I got all the then bigwigs in the book trade librarians, booksellers, agents, whatever. We had this massive meeting at the PA that was then in Bedford Square, which we convened, and then a steering committee was set up that I then sat on. But I wasn't essentially it was like I was a catalyst for the book trade to actually, and the idea being that if you see, and I guess this goes for Jolabokaflod as well, the reason why generic book campaigns didn't work as well previously is that publishers were expected to put a bit of money into a big pot that would then get spent on generic advertising, and that doesn't work if you can't measure whether or not your contribution actually made a difference to your own books. But if you treat the event like a hashtag, and then you can promote your own books with your own budget, you can then measure, the impact of putting a World Book Day or a Jolabokaflod hashtag on things.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to AI. So I mean, do you think that the recommendations that AI might generate would be, as good as a human beings, or do you think there's I mean, where do you think the comparison is? I mean, would you believe the recommendations that ChatGPT might give you?
Do you know, it's a really interesting question because it's not sentient, and part of what makes books recommendable, for want of an actual word, is the emotions they evoke. It's not just the words and how that makes you feel reading the story. It's the smell and the touch, and that anybody who loves books understands that it's very very personal. And so I think when people recommend books, it's based on their experience as a reader, and I don't think, of course, it doesn't understand that at all. So I don't know what inspires its recommendations, whether it goes off some kind of sales data or whether it's just the first things that it finds when it's searching. So I do think that may be lacking. I don't know of a solution. I don't know if you do it like an AI solution.
Well, I mean, the one thing I think you could do is set up a series of prompts that ask you questions about your own interests and hobbies, and
that's true.
What you like doing, and then at the end saying, based on this personal profile that you've now collected some data about me, maybe you can recommend some books.
I think that's probably the smarter way of doing it, for sure. I was thinking earlier about this, and when I read The Time Traveller's Wife, for example, I mean the last 50 pages, I was in floods of tears. I mean, it was like so emotional. But I can't imagine what I could be asked in a questionnaire that would lead an AI to give me that. I'm not interested in time travel per se,
No.
And the love story, of course. But there are lots of books about love stories, and but the specifics of what was so touching about that story might be hard to capture, but maybe not. And that's kind of intriguing. Like, I would love that. People get concerned about now AI is here, and it's facilitating more books going into print. Are we commoditizing a precious format, or isn't it going to be hard to discover the really genuinely good books where there's been a writing craft involved? And the AI that you're talking about could actually facilitate. It's okay. It's all still discoverable. We can get specific based on your requirements.
Well, or you could ask it, send me some left field suggestions. I mean, I guess. I mean, but the other problem, which I think which I guess AI might actually suffer from as well, is it's a bit like an algorithm, and an algorithm only knows what happened in history, what happened last time, and so it doesn't identify things that come out of nowhere. So I mean, in the publishing business, as you know, I mean, the book trade is really good at jumping on bandwagons. So if something's been successful, a company will launch something in the same genre, pretty quickly. But what it's less good at is actually identifying massive hits, which are different from what's been successful previously.
Yes, yeah, that is true. But you're right. It is a historical view, isn't it, rather than a projection or something particularly relevant to the here and now.
Because AI is based on on the data that it's already got in its database. It's not.
And that's changing as well now, isn't it? You know, when ChatGPT first came out, it was all like, oh, you know, be careful with when you're asking it for facts, because A, it kind of lies / hallucinates, and B, its training data only went up to September 2021. Do you remember? Like last year, so everything was at least 2 years old. Whereas now, you know, you have LLM companies doing, you know, doing rights deals with publishers of content, so that they can very quickly learn in a very up-to-date way. So
yeah, it's interesting. And ChatGPT, of course, has launched its search function and I guess in response to like Gemini at Google, and you know, they're all in competition with each other, aren't they? So
yes, yeah.
So I mean, thinking about AI more generally, I mean, well, how do you think it's going to impact the future of or maybe the present of the book industry, and where do you see your part in it?
I would really like. I think we would all like to see some precedent sets or some guidelines around how far it's allowed to go in the creative process. It's difficult, you know, but where I am very excited for AI in publishing is around what it can do with the workflows. You know, my part in it is really focused on book production, which is kind of like one of the last frontiers ventured in terms of how closely we bring in technology into the publishing. You know, in terms of data management, it's there. You know, all kind of, you know, marketing, of course, AI has been prevalent for a while, but in this kind of building a book, it's kind of like, you know, how closely do you let it in? So I feel very strongly that AI should be there to accelerate processes by making workflows more readily available to people on their own terms, on their own time. But I don't think it should be, and it can provide prompts and inspiration, but I don't think it should be writing for people, you know, who are saying they're writers. I just don't.
Well, no, I mean, I'm actually, well, again, a bit of a segue, but I write quite regularly for the bookseller, and I've got a comment piece that's being published at the end of the year. Actually, partly inspired by the fact that I watched you on a panel with some other AI experts having a conversation at a conference called Future Book quite recently, and it struck me that and I'd recently been on a kind of webinar with one of these, you know, AI-led publishing offers, and I went on that. You know, to that presentation, and what was scary to me was the high quality of the stuff that was being written by AI, particularly in the sort of children's book field.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, and people were being asked to spend like thousands of US dollars on a program that was going to help them write a book from idea to selling it on Amazon within 2.5 hours.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it does beg the question though of why does that person want to do that? Like if they don't have that connection with the book format. I understand why people want a book when they're not a writer. I've been in that business for nearly a decade, and you know, there are people who just don't have a talent with the written word, but they completely appreciate the book format. And I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you're time poor and you're dyslexic and you have ADHD, then it's kind of mean to be told like, oh, well, we don't care, write it anyway. You know, they're not going to, but they've still got something really important to say in a non-fiction world. Anything that can facilitate getting that gold out of their heads and into a wider audience, you know, I think is better, but it's still got to be theirs. You know, I do question the motive of somebody who doesn't have the content or the means to provide it.
It's simply sales. You know, I mean, you know, there were people who were on that call who'd written 50, 100 books, and they were selling them all on Amazon.
Wow.
So my piece that I'm going to be writing, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, is if this is inevitable, that we're going to get swamped by AI content, I'm going to pose a suggestion, which I'm hoping will open up some discussion in the trade, about maybe inventing a new format which you can lump all these AI-led product into. So the same as like hardback, paperback, you know, ebook, audiobook, why not have an AI format where you can put all these products in there so that you're separating out the AI stuff from the human stuff?
That's fascinating, actually. It's almost like in sports where you'd have different categories. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not the technical person. I mean, maybe you might have some ideas about how to make that work. But I think because what you're saying is, we value this stuff, and there will be people out there that might want to read that AI related things. But in the same way that maybe Wattpad is giving people an opportunity to write fan fiction, there's always going to be an audience for the Wattpad stuff. So why not an audience for AI stuff that everybody can benefit from without the downside?
The AI generated,
yeah,
versus AI assisted, yeah, because at least then everybody's clear.
Yeah,
there's and I think that's part of the issue is there's no transparency.
And if you incentivize people to actually be honest about when something's been written by AI by saying, yeah, it's okay, you can sell that if you'd like to, but you need to say that it's been written by AI, But anyway, so that will be an interesting conversation to see how people respond to that at the end of the year.
That's very true. Yeah, I can't see a downside, so it'd be good to maybe
see what people say, but especially maybe you could speak to this recent House of Lords debate about talking about AI in relation to the new data bill that's going through. And there's a new commission that's been set up for next year to talk about AI and copyright and whatever. Is that something you've been following?
It is. I think at the moment it's still too unclear. There's still, but I think the right questions are being asked, and it's important. It was inevitable the conversation would begin. I went to the publishing show 2 years ago. 2 years ago in March, over 2.5 years ago now, and somebody in the audience asked the CEO of a media group, it's likely that your journalists will be publishing AI generated content now. There's LLMs out there. How are you safeguarding against that? And they didn't really have an answer. It was uncomfortable for them because they were sort of saying, well, of course we can't do anything at the moment. We don't have a way of checking for it, but look, the industry will just have to form a precedent. They'll just have to decide on the rules. And I remember thinking at the time, that's going to be so difficult because, look at black cabs and Uber. The same thing happened there, and of course you sort of can't really when the change is inevitable and the rest of the world is driving in that direction. However, with that said, copyright is a serious issue, and anybody who's ever had anything stolen from them, understands that. And I do think it's outrageous that you can just take somebody's work and train, whether it's a machine or a person, to then just to kind of keep reproducing that work for their own financial gain with no acknowledgement or permission. I think it's stealing, it's theft, So I think there's got to be some way of where you draw the line, but establishing that will be difficult.
I think I don't know about how feasible this might be, but maybe you could, you're maybe a technical, you've got some technical wisdom here. It's as long as AI prevents you from or if you have a prompt that says, I would like to write something in the style of J.K. Rowling, let's say, and it's learned how J.K. Rowling writes Harry Potter, as long as that's not allowed, then in terms of recreating things and then passing off the information or the book that's created as being like something that's been rediscovered in somebody's attic and has been written by J.K. Rowling, would that work, or is that being a bit idealistic?
Potentially, because what if somebody just does have a writing style that's like JK? What if it's kind of that they may just naturally write in a certain way? And I think, yeah. I think there's also the matter of ideas do get shared, and that is how people learn.
Yeah.
So again, how far do we go with saying, oh, that's mine, you can't use it? It's kind of like, so I think there's a differentiation between emulating somebody on purpose for your own financial gain, That's slightly different to taking what they've created and masking it as yours for your own. I think that's to me very clearly wrong. Emulating somebody else to develop your own style, if you have a natural tendency in that way, but you're looking at J.K. Rowling as your role model, I think is natural. I think it's the deliberate nature of it and the purpose of it that kind of varies. But again, it's hard to differentiate. And then you kind of
it's the difference between being influenced by somebody's writing style and simply passing off, isn't it? So
it is. And then how do you prove intent, and how do you? So it does get complicated. And again, I think this other thing of like, what if some of the early philosophers had just said like you can't use that, you know what I mean? It was actually there are
it's like the Isaac Newton idea about standing on the shoulders of giants, isn't it? So
yes, it is.
I mean, where everybody has always, if you're a writer, you've always been influenced by other writers. You're not writing in a vacuum, are you? So
no, and that's the nature of creativity. It takes something and then it kind of spins around and it comes out in another form, and that's how it works. So it's an interesting one.
Okay, so let's talk about the experience of reading. I mean, how do you think AI is going to impact, how people read going forward?
It's another really good question. I don't fully understand how, if it can emulate. Let's just take a work of fiction. If it can emulate the style because it can emulate the structure and vocabulary, and it can write something that sounds good, but can it evoke those same emotions when no emotion's been poured into it in the first place? Sometimes you can. I work with a writer who, when she writes something, I can feel what she put into it, and I don't know if that sounds daft or normal to anyone listening, but I know when she's loved writing what she's written, and I can tell when she's been distracted or is somehow feeling something negative when she's writing, because part of one of her tools that she draws on from her own internal process is her ability to be very emotionally intuitive, and she likes to really kind of get, when she's editing authors' work, she likes to really get into their frame of mind and really kind of associate with them, and she would refer to it as like she'll channel them. So it's not this detached technical process for her. It's a very involved one, and that's part of the invisible work that editors do, right? That doesn't necessarily get acknowledged, but because you can't see it, but you can feel it. And I think the reading experience, that's part of it, is that emotion. And books, that's why even for people who don't really read regularly and would never write a book, still has this kind of like inbuilt kind of I think there's a need to protect the format somehow, and it's because they're so personal. They've been with us through our childhoods. They're how we learn, they're how we escape, they're how we create, so it's a very personal thing, reading, and I don't know if AI has the ability to recreate
I do think that Marshall McLuhan's idea of the medium as the message is still very relevant, in that there will be certain things that AI can do supremely well, but other things that it won't be able to do as well. And so books as a product, as a format, will sort of re-mold themselves in order to accommodate this new environment where AI exists. And so, there'll be the people who are publishers will say, books can do this, but AI can't, for example, so it's just.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there is a business behind all of this. At the end of the day, I do also think that we've had these discussions before in other contexts in the publishing industry, right? Like ebooks. Oh my gosh, paperbacks are dead. Amazon. Oh, what's going to happen to the bookshop? Well, actually, they had their 10th consecutive year of growth in the UK and Ireland last year. It does change things, and that in itself introduces risk and threat. Yes, and that is, if you're not someone that would say they've got this big entrepreneurial mindset, but instead actually you run a local business that's a pillar in the community, and it's something that goes back through some generations and it's something you care about, it's going to be harder to automatically step into all of a sudden this like, let's innovate because any changes come. So it does harm in that way, these kind of big rapid changes. But it's the world, you know, it's what happens.
It's with us, you know. I don't think it's going away, is it? I mean, clearly from your point of view, you're kind of invested in its success, aren't you? So
I want to lean in because I think in the way that I use AI, and you know, the way that Clio Books uses AI, the author retains the copyright. It's completely secure. We don't give it to LLMs. They don't have access to it. Clio doesn't even train itself on the author content that's done within it. So it's AI assisted, but not AI generated. Right. And so that's really important. That's where we draw the line, you know. So it's about asking the right questions and providing the right environment for authors to get what's in their head into a document that an editor can collaborate with. It doesn't replace editors. It just speeds up that initial drafting ideation process.
So do you see, I mean, does Clio Books work in tandem with other online products like, for example, Plotter, or what's the other one? I forgot. There's another. I've forgotten what it is. There's like other kind of online platforms which help you, you know, write things online. I mean, do you have plugins for things, or is it like its own system? Is it like a self-contained system?
It's a self-contained system, yeah. And bearing in mind, it only does non-fiction, and
Right.
there are no current plans to move into fiction. So, in terms of character development, you know, plot development, it doesn't really need that. This is all kind of business books and memoirs. But you know, it asks the questions that help it to recommend the right structure. You know, it suggests the right structure and how you'll order your parts and chapters. And then once you're happy, it'll ask you questions, and that the questions it asks you, that's the only generative part of it. It comes up with questions.
That's interesting, because I mean, I guess you can, part of your marketing might be that you're the non-fiction version of Plotter, for example, by what you just described.
Exactly. It could well be seen that way. It's just it's a way to make it easier for people, easier and faster. That's
interesting. So do in terms of, you know, Jolabokaflod being a Christmas related tradition, I mean, how do you see AI or the work that you do with Clio? I mean, are you impacted by Christmas at all, or is it something that is just you know, doesn't really make a difference?
I think Christmas is a natural time for people to reflect, and that involves going inwards, you know, and I think it's that time where you down tools and you switch everything off, and it's a natural time to spend with family. And I think you reflect on the year that's gone, and you look at what's coming up in the year ahead. And so I think that it's a natural time for people to start thinking, you know, in terms of their own stories and their own messages, and you know, what they hope for and what they want to leave behind. So I think it's quite an emotive time, and quite an important one. So I certainly think that the tradition of Jolabokaflod and spending time with family and reading, I think that will continue. I don't think AI or anything digital is going to take the essence of that away.
It's an experience, yeah. So with that in mind, if you were to, you know, be purchasing a book that you were going to give to a loved one at Christmas, or maybe to a friend, you know, Jolabokaflod next year is going to be developing this online digital catalogue, which is going to be like a Christmas catalogue that you might get from Waterstones, you know, which tells you about all the new books that you might purchase at Christmas time. It's going to be but instead of it being like the new books, it's going to be books that people recommend. You know, so I was wondering if you had some book recommendations that you'd like to share with our audience.
I do, thank you. So before the call, Christopher asked me for a book recommendation, and like, as anyone who loves books, like, I couldn't pick one, so I've got three.
Okay. So thank you.
Well, this one, surely we've all read it.
Oh, right. Wow. Okay. Yeah, famous.
But have you reread it as an adult? It's so touching. I love this because my grandmother used to read this to me along with all the Roald Dahl books when I was little. And she saw my love of the written word quite early on and nurtured it. And there was a travelling library that used to stop at the end of her driveway because she lived really in a rural place. And it was a couple that had gutted a caravan and they'd built in shelves and they'd just put like elastic bands all around to keep the books in. And so and they would just drive around the countryside to all the the farms and they would come once a month. And so she knew when they were coming. We'd wait at the end of the driveway, and I was allowed to get 3 books, and we'd swap them out. I remember being so young when she first started doing it that she had to lift me up the steps. And anyway, these were, so this is like very close to my heart, but it's such a beautiful story.
That's one of the things I'm going to ask people to do next year when we carry on this podcast, is actually to share examples of books that have made a big impact and created memories, and you've already done that for me, so that's great. So what's your second book?
Okay, well, the other one I've actually only just started. The Vonnegut Love Letters. Kurt Vonnegut, who was obviously a prolific author, his daughter found in a dusty box in her parents' attic when she was clearing it out a box full of love letters between him and her mother. And there's absolutely loads, and it kind of and it shows them. And there's only a little break for a couple of years when he was at war and he went missing in action in the Second World War. But he came home and they got married and they had kids, and the daughter Alice has published all of these letters between her parents into a book. So I'm nowhere near finished, but
no, that's interesting, because he only died relatively recently, maybe about 10 years ago, something like that. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, these are during the war. These are from the 1940s.
Wow.
And actually, he had doubts as a writer. He had lapses in confidence, and it was his wife that encouraged it and kept building him up.
Well, that's a true partnership, isn't it? Well, quite often when you're a writer, you need the backup of other people. So
yes, exactly. It's a lonely world otherwise, isn't it? Well, they said Stephen King actually acknowledges, doesn't he, that when he's written many of his amazing books, that he was actually, he was in a very isolated state and very difficult to be married to by his own admission.
Well, I mean, it's obviously in his case, it's kind of worked out okay, hasn't it? So
it has, yeah. On writing, his book about his writing process is fascinating. Actually.
Yeah. That's one of the seminal books in terms of if you want to read about a writer's process, that's one of those books that is well worth reading. Yeah. So your third.
My third. This caught my eye in a tiny local bookshop in Broadstairs in Kent, which is where Dickens wrote a lot, and Dickens' house is still there that you can go and look around. And just around the back of the hotel where he and quite a few other famous writers kind of were staying, because they used to look out over the sea and get inspired. Behind there's a bookshop, and it's like one of those, like, exactly how you imagine a bookshop. It's kind of they're all heaped on top of each other, shelves stacked to the ceiling, and but it's well taken care of, and there's a grandfather clock in the corner and all that kind of thing. And I was like, I could just go in there and just look at things, for ages. And I found this and I thought it's really quite special.
Wow.
And we first of all look at these amazing illustrations.
Wow, that's lovely. Wow.
Isn't it? And it's writing by Oscar Wilde, and it's different stories, essays, and it's illustrated. It's illustrated throughout. So
is that a new edition, or is it something that was published a while ago?
This was published in 1997.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And so let me just show you some of. I mean, this is just the content page, right? How beautiful.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing.
And it covers all sorts of things, very political, but this beautiful touches throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, Oscar Wilde was a genius.
He was. So it's called The Wit of Oscar Wilde, if you can find it.
The Wit of Oscar Wilde. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you for those suggestions. So when I put the your 3 recommendations as kind of features in this catalogue, one of the things I do, you've explained what the book is, you said why you love those books, but essentially under each of those recommendations, I have like a classified ad for the person. So what would you like to promote about yourself or your businesses in those ads that I run in the catalogue?
Thank you for the question. Well, if you're a non-fiction author to be, and you love the idea of having a book and authoring a book, you've got something important to share, but you don't know how to go about it, then Cleobooks.ai is a resource that was designed especially for you.
Yeah, brilliant. That's nice and short and succinct and clear. So if people want to get hold of you, Georgia, how would they do that?
You can get hold of me, Georgia, at Cleobooks.ai. It's CLIO, or via LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm on there pretty much every day. And of course, via the Cleobooks or writebusinessresults.com websites.
Okay, so if people want to purchase your services, is it simply they email you, or is there a discovery call process, or?
There is. If you go via the website, yeah, the Cleobooks.ai, and you'll see an option there to get in touch, and that will put you through to the right people, and you'll be able to get access to an account, play around, and we'll just kind of lead you through it.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in today's chat. I'd just like to remind everybody that's watching to like the video, to share it around your networks, your family and friends, anybody that's interested in AI, or maybe they're writing some non-fiction. It might be something they'd enjoy watching. And also click on the notification bell so that you know when new videos are coming up. So I'd just like to say thank you so much to Georgia for being with me today. And future people who are watching the video, hope you enjoy the video. And I'm going to stop the session now. So goodbye, everybody.